The small suburban town seemed like any other, rows of quiet houses lined neatly along the streets, trees rustling with the faint breeze, and the glow of lampposts breaking the darkness of night. Yet in the middle of this seemingly peaceful place stood an old house, larger than the rest, its windows reflecting an unsettling emptiness, as though they were eyes watching from another world. To most, it was just another rental property that had stood for decades, but for those who believed in whispers, the house carried a heavier name, one tied to something darker, the Amityville curse. Jim, a young college student looking for part-time work, had never cared much about legends or the supernatural. He was practical, eager to earn enough money to pay his tuition, and never one to waste energy on ghost stories. That's why, when his friend connected him with a couple looking for someone to house sit for a week, he didn't think twice. The pay was generous, the hours simple, and the location close enough to campus. It was an easy choice, or so it seemed. The house looked harmless during the day. Its brick walls and aging shutters gave it a sense of old-fashioned charm, and Jim had even thought it might be cozy. Inside, the couple gave him a quick tour before leaving, showing him the kitchen, living room, bedrooms, and basement. They mentioned the rules: lock the doors at night, keep an eye on the place, and water the plants. Simple. But as Jim watched their car disappear down the street, an odd stillness settled over the house, as though it exhaled only when the owners left. He brushed it off, shouldering his backpack and settling in for the week. The first evening passed quietly. Jim set his laptop on the kitchen table, ate leftover pizza, and finished assignments while the sound of the refrigerator hummed behind him. Yet, as the hours ticked toward midnight, the silence of the house grew heavy. Every creak in the floorboards seemed amplified. Every gust of wind outside echoed strangely through the walls. At one point, he thought he heard faint footsteps upstairs. He froze, staring at the ceiling, but dismissed it as his imagination. After all, old houses made noises. That was normal. But when he finally climbed into the guest bed, pulling the blanket tight around himself, he dreamt of something that wasn't normal at all. Shadows moved in his sleep, long, stretched figures that shifted along the walls. He dreamt of a woman with hollow eyes, standing silently in the hallway, watching him. Her lips didn't move, but he felt her voice pressing against his ears. "You shouldn't be here." Jim woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, and sat in darkness for a long time, convincing himself it was only a dream. The following day, things began to unravel further. While in the kitchen pouring cereal, he felt the sensation of being watched, the hairs on his arms rising despite the sunlight streaming through the window. He turned sharply, expecting someone to be standing behind him, but the room was empty. Later, while brushing his teeth, the bathroom light flickered violently, buzzing as though about to shatter, before stabilizing again. He laughed nervously, muttering to himself about faulty wiring. Yet the laughter didn't silence the unease. By the third night, sleep became impossible. Each time Jim closed his eyes, he heard faint whispers around him. Sometimes it sounded like a child crying, other times like voices murmuring from the walls. The dreams returned, visions of the woman with hollow eyes, her figure closer each time. In one dream, she sat on the edge of his bed, her hand reaching toward his chest, her voice repeating the same phrase, "You shouldn't be here." Exhausted and unsettled, Jim called his friend on the fourth day, joking about how creepy the place felt. His friend laughed, teasing him about ghosts, but when Jim explained the dreams and whispers, the laughter faded. "Wait," his friend said cautiously. "Where exactly are you staying again?" Jim mentioned the address, and a heavy pause filled the line. His friend exhaled slowly. "Man, I think that's one of those houses." Jim frowned, pressing for more, but his friend refused to explain further, only saying he should be careful. The unease multiplied. Later that evening, while studying in the living room, Jim heard a thump upstairs. He rose carefully, heart pounding, and crept up the staircase. The hallway stretched dark and cold, the air heavier with each step. At the end of the hall, the door to the master bedroom was ajar. He knew he had left it closed. Pushing it open slowly, he found the room still. Dust floated in the faint light seeping through the curtains. Yet as he turned to leave, a shape moved in the corner of his eye. He froze, staring at the mirror mounted on the dresser. His reflection looked back at him, but He wasn't alone. Behind his image stood the pale woman with hollow eyes, her face sunken, her hands stretching outward. Jim spun around, but the room was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, his reflection was alone again. Panic clawed through him. He fled downstairs, grabbing his backpack, but when he reached the front door, the knob wouldn't turn. He twisted harder, but it was as though the lock itself had fused shut. Fear surged as he realized he was trapped. He stumbled back, nearly tripping, his breath ragged as whispers filled the air, louder than before. "You shouldn't be here." The next days blurred into a cycle of terror. Sleep came only in short, broken bursts, each dream more vivid than the last. He dreamt of bodies buried in the walls, of blood seeping through the ceilings, of screams that rattled his skull. Objects began moving on their own, chairs sliding across the floor, doors slamming shut, lights flickering uncontrollably. The house had awakened, and Jim was its prisoner. One night, while trying desperately to leave, he found himself drawn into the basement. The air was thick, damp, carrying a stench of rot. He fumbled with the light switch, but only a faint bulb flickered above, illuminating the clutter of old boxes and broken furniture. Then, in the far corner, he saw her, the woman, standing motionless, her hollow eyes locked on him. His body froze, unable to move. She lifted a hand slowly, pointing toward the floor. Jim's gaze followed, and his stomach twisted. The dirt in the basement shifted, as though something beneath it was stirring. Hands, pale and skeletal, began breaking through the soil, clawing upward. Dozens of them. The sound of moaning filled the basement as half-rotted figures began to rise, their faces twisted in agony. Jim screamed, stumbling backward, but the stairs behind him vanished into darkness. The woman's voice filled the air once more, louder than ever, echoing in his skull, "You shouldn't be here." Jim's mind fractured. He didn't know if he was awake or dreaming, alive or already dead. The house had swallowed him whole. His screams echoed through the basement, but outside, the neighborhood remained silent, the world unaware of the terror unfolding inside. When the couple returned days later, expecting to find Jim waiting, the house stood silent. The doors were locked, the windows closed. They stepped inside cautiously, calling his name. No answer. The rooms were neat, untouched, as though no one had been there. But in the basement, the smell of rot lingered, and on the dirt floor lay Jim's backpack, torn open, his belongings scattered. Of Jim himself there was no sign. The woman with hollow eyes had claimed another. The Amityville curse lived on, feeding, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to enter. The house breathed quietly once more, watching with its empty windows, patient and eternal.